Hello, dear friends. My name is Sofya Dorinskaya. I am a psychiatrist and the head of the Medical Information Center. Continuing with the previous video about what is the fight against alcoholism and why. I believe that the fight against alcoholism in its current form is simply a typical redistribution of markets in favor of legal synthetic psychiatric drugs. I received quite a lot of questions naturally because the problem of alcoholism still exists in Russia. And people are asking, what should we do then? And how can we live with this at all? Today I will answer this question for you. The first problem, the reason why people become alcoholics, is attention hunger. Many individuals have tried consuming alcohol at least once in their life, perhaps even when they were feeling quite hungry. Later on, for example, when that same person happens to see a bottle of alcohol or notices various alcoholic beverages on display in a local store, even in cases where they might not notice it happening. If the body has consumed alcohol at some point during the course of their life, then the physiological response to the sensation of hunger can be quite different. It's the desire to drink alcohol. For one simple reason. The body knows where it can very quickly get energy from. If you happen to visit almost any major chain store in the late evening hours where alcohol is being sold, you will likely see a long line of tired young people who are very clearly just now coming home from a long day at work. And each of them is buying a bottle of beer. This essentially means that in many cases, the person is just hungry, but they have mistakenly confused this feeling, and it genuinely appears to them that they are actually craving an alcoholic drink. Therefore, and I insist on this, and if I have the opportunity, I will talk about this on any platform. In Russia, the problem has not yet been solved. The nutrition of the population. As long as the population of Russia lives in hunger, in a state of hunger, in total hunger, it is impossible to talk about solving the problem of alcoholism. The truth of the matter is that such a solution simply does not exist at this point in time. When we finally achieve a situation where a single kilogram of meat costs exactly as much as a bottle of beer, and when any person, no matter what their specific level of income or financial status might be, can walk into any local grocery store and purchase exactly as much meat as they could possibly want or need, then after a significant period of time has passed, perhaps in 5 years, or maybe even sooner than that, we can finally begin to talk about the real possibility that the overall level of alcoholism in our society might finally begin to show a measurable decrease. Most likely it will decrease. Do you understand? Let me tell you a story. This is a true story. Actually, it's not even a story. It's more like a saying among addiction specialists. It dates back to Soviet times. You know, the psychiatry and addiction treatment departments are, in principle, separate departments. And addiction specialists very often, in one way or another, became friends with their patients. And in Soviet times, it was very difficult to find people with working class professions to, for example, work in the garden or help out with heavy labor. But as a rule, it was laborers who were treated in the alcoholism wards. So the doctors would make arrangements with these laborers to have them work on their plots of land. Naturally, the condition was that the doctor would give them alcohol in return. Of course, the doctor wasn't actually going to give them any alcohol. But what did the doctor do when these workers came to him? Well, the addiction specialist knows this perfectly well. He would tell them, sure, of course, I'll give you alcohol at the end of the work, no problem. But first he would feed them very well. And this meal had to include a lot of meat. The food had to be of very high quality, both in terms of nutrition, calories, and protein content. And people would say to him, well, you really are a sly one, doctor. You know perfectly well that after such a meal, no one will want any vodka. So just remember this. If a person is truly struggling with hunger, you are never going to be able to effectively solve their underlying problem with alcoholism. Right now, I want to immediately respond to those common attitudes and everyday opinions that say, oh, people are already overweight, they already eat too much. I read such comments, they should actually eat less. What are you even talking about? Just look at our population. As a doctor, I want to tell you, a hungry person can be overweight because there are two types of hunger. One form leads to anorexia, while the other is the edematous form of hunger. There's a saying, swelling from hunger. This person isn't overweight, they're swollen, because when the protein level in the bloodstream drops, a person develops edema. That's exactly why. Vegans, these plant eaters, very often have headaches. Do you understand? That's their problem, which they keep coming with, writing about, asking me what to do. That's exactly why they so often have headaches, because it's simply swelling of the organ, swelling of the brain caused by hunger. Vitamin deficiencies very often cause excess weight. As I already mentioned, pellagra and scurvy, one of the clinical signs is being overweight. A person overweight, and that's exactly why you can never determine by appearance alone whether a person is eating enough or not. You need to actively and thoroughly question them about what they eat. And so, the reason for alcoholism is hunger. Why? Because hunger is pain. When you have pain, if it's localized, like a toothache, if someone asks you where it hurts, you can point to the exact spot. If your finger hurts, you can show the place. But there is pain. Widespread, disseminated, and scattered throughout. This is non-localized pain. When you simply cannot precisely pinpoint or identify the exact location where it hurts. When it feels as though every single cell in your entire body is screaming out in agony. And every hungry cell sends a relentless signal of intense pain directly to your brain. You see, that's exactly why when I say that when we look at psychosis, we must search for the cause. The cause of psychosis is pain, and it is this pain. It simply drives you insane, though that can also vary. Sometimes it's stronger. There are degrees to it as well, you understand? Therefore, whenever a person experiences hunger, their central nervous system begins to receive intense pain signals from every single cell throughout the body. However, because this physical pain is not localized to one specific spot, the sensation is sublimated and transformed into a wide variety of complex emotions and intense desires. This often manifests as sudden feelings of anger, deep-seated emotions of hatred, and a general sense of irritability that permeates their entire psychological state. That is why hungry people are aggressive, you see? They can't control themselves. Arguments that happen between such people, if these people are also not well-mannered, can even end in knife fights. It's pain that intensifies and drives a person insane. And naturally, when a person already knows the solution to this problem, the first is alcohol. It gives a person, or rather the human body, energy for a while. Secondly, alcohol numbs the pain. A person becomes numb like wood. If you have ever experienced, and with alcohol intoxication, even of moderate severity, you know that even if you cut yourself, you don't really feel any particular pain. Well, you cut yourself, it's nothing really. Alcohol numbs the pain. That's exactly why a hungry person becomes an alcoholic, because for him, this is the solution. Do you understand? He has no money for food. Meat costs an exorbitant amount of money, and such a quantity that a person could actually feel full. Not just for one day, but so that he could finally eat his fill and be satisfied every day. Do you understand? The diffused pain from hunger is sublimated into the desire to drink. I explain this mechanism in great detail in my book. This is Crazy Psychiatry. If you haven't read it, you should. There, it's explained in detail. How and why this happens. Vitamin deficiencies cause this pain. This diffused pain, every cell suffers. You can't pinpoint a specific place in the body that suffers from vitamin deficiency. All the cells are suffering. That's why the psychological manifestations of vitamin deficiencies are so varied. Do you understand? That's exactly why, without knowledge of vitamin deficiencies, you will never be able to cope with mental disorders. That's exactly why, as a psychiatrist, I study this topic, and that's why I'm able to help people with psychosis, take them off psychotropic medications, and help alcoholics stop drinking, because there is biology, because there is physiology, because that's how it works. Therefore, First, if you want to help someone stop drinking alcohol, you need to feed them, and not just once. You basically need to feed them. You need to feed them for months. You need to feed them very well, with meat. Forgive me for using such a blunt Russian word. To gorge. A person needs to gorge on meat, constantly and in large amounts. As soon as you notice that someone is tense, maybe they snapped at you or responded sharply, they're hungry. He's hungry, nothing else is going on, this person is just hungry. You need to keep feeding them, even if it happens 2 hours after you gave them a huge piece of meat. That means they've already digested it, that their body is so hungry that the 1.5 kilograms of meat he ate 2 hours ago is already gone. Feed him again, you see. That is precisely why, when we look at it from a broad statewide perspective, talking about addressing the deeply rooted and complex issues surrounding alcoholism, while you still have not even ensured that your entire population has enough food to eat, is quite frankly nothing more than a complete sham. It is merely empty and meaningless talk. It is nothing but foolish clowning around, and it is simply a way of playing to the crowd for attention. Because and Russia, whether you like it or not, throughout its entire 1,000-year history, has never managed to feed its people, its own population. But this is one of the few tasks of the country's leadership, to make sure that the population is well fed. And not just with carrots and cabbage, but with meat. Meat should be that accessible. Let me tell you, Hungary is a small country. I don't know, I think in terms of territory it's even smaller than Sverdlovsk Oblast. A small country. But even here, in certain chain stores, there is meat, frozen meat. Yes, it's frozen. These are frozen chicken legs. Not feet, but an actual leg, a meaty one you can eat. So there, at sales, you can find frozen 5-kilogram bags of these legs for 70 to 90 rubles in Russian money. Even if a person has absolutely nothing at all to their name, and even if they are reduced to begging for a simple meal, they can still find a place to rest at the very end of the day. To this store, grab a 5-kilogram bag of these chicken legs, cook them over a fire, and have a full meal. That's why the first solution, both on a personal and a governmental level, to the problem of alcoholism is this. Feed the person. Feed the person. Do you understand? It seems simple, but in reality, everything is done to talk this problem to death. To tell you how meat is supposedly scary, to claim that healthy eating is just bird food in the form of grains and seeds, or I don't know, some herbs. That's nonsense, that's utter rubbish. The only protein that is truly absorbed by the human body, the high-quality protein, is animal protein. No plant protein will ever match it in terms of quality, or in terms of how easily the body can digest it compared to animal protein. Therefore, if a person even suspects they have hypovitaminosis, there can be no talk at all of replacing animal proteins with plant proteins. Their body is already barely managing to function as it is. What kind of efficient plant protein absorption are we even talking about in this state? So, it is simply not an option. The first is hunger. Next, the consequences of alcohol consumption. Alcohol is, without a doubt, a narcotic substance. But, as I already said, compared to all other drugs, this is probably the mildest drug that exists on the planet. It is the drug that is most easily controlled by humans. It is a drug known to humans. It has been known for centuries how to handle it. Naturally, it is also well known what consequences alcohol consumption leads to. The first consequence is pellagra. As you can see, this is the so-called characteristic alcoholic tan in alcoholics. It's this kind of brownish tint to their skin. This is exactly the pellagrous change in the skin. And what needs to be done, the first thing to give these people is nicotinic acid because they have pellagra. We are dealing with a vicious circle. A person is hungry, they have disseminated pain, which is sublimated into a desire to get energy and relieve the pain. They consume alcohol, which leads to vitamin deficiencies that cause pain. And so all of this creates a vicious circle. Therefore, to break this vicious circle, you need to feed the person. You give them nicotinic acid because they have pellagra. And the second pathology, which is absolutely well documented, the vitamin deficiency described in alcoholics, is beriberi. How do you recognize it? It's the so-called rooster's foot. Alcoholics walk like this, like roosters, yes, rooster's foot. They throw their foot out like this. That's beriberi, that's vitamin B1 deficiency. Do you want a solution? On a national scale, feed the population. And if I were the Minister of Health of Russia, of course I never will be, and if I were given the task to put an end to the alcoholism situation in the country, I would leave the office of the Minister of Health and go to the office of the Minister of Agriculture. And together, we would develop a program on how to feed the population. For example, after World War II, the countries of Europe, here as well, of course, all the countries had suffered destruction, and their task once again was to feed their populations. What did they do? They abolished all taxes on agriculture for 3 years. Do whatever you want. If you want to raise livestock, do it. If you want to grow vegetables, fruits, any products, go ahead. For 3 years, there were no taxes at all. I have never heard of our agriculture being exempted from taxes, not even once, not even for a year, ever. On the contrary, we always have some laws trying to catch a farmer with the wrong kind of pig. You can have 2, but the 3rd one is not allowed. Listen, your people are hungry? What do you mean you can have 2, but not the 3rd? Yes, let them raise a dozen of these pigs in every yard, I don't care. The only thing I would strictly insist on is, of course, sanitary control of the meat. But there must be meat. Everyone who can should be raising meat, even those who can't, and people should be taught how to do it as well. Do you understand? The first task is to feed the population. For the first time in the entire 1,000-year history of the country. Listen, it's about time already. Do you understand? This is the first solution, and it's on a national scale. Individually, as I said, you shouldn't just feed someone once, but really feed them. The program should be to feed a person every day for months with meat. As soon as you notice that something is off, as I already said, and I'll repeat it, if someone gives you a tense look, mutters something, or doesn't respond to you, if a person is sitting there looking tense, that's it. Go eat, go eat. Meat, you understand? And you'll see that the person will, even if he looks at that bottle, it just won't go down, you see? If you catch that moment of hunger, if the person isn't completely demented yet and can somehow restrain himself, and still make it to the dining table, instead of reaching for the shot glass. And next, these are the vitamin deficiencies I told you about. These vitamin deficiencies are written about by Professor Slepsky. Please, all this information is now becoming available. We are doing everything to return this data to people. We are doing everything we can so that you can solve your problems. This was Sofya Dorinskaya with you. All the best. Goodbye.